Saints, it is a delight to welcome back to our diocese, to Indiana, the Reverend James Clark III. And he is, I want to say, a bright star in the work we do around buildings, mission, real estate, the church, all of it. He is a friend to many of us. Folks from Good Samaritan Brownsburg, I think, introduced him to me first as they began to dream about a village hub and a place to worship more permanently in that place. And he has worked with many others through the Gift of Place program at Trinity Church in the city of New York, where he serves as the managing director of Mission Real Estate Development. He actually does work beyond just the United States, but works globally to identify and help churches discern, plan, and develop income-generating real estate projects that can create sustainable financial capacity for ministry and direct social impact in the communities that they serve. He has 38 years of business experience encompassing commercial and real estate investment, finance, development, portfolio management, leasing, and investment banking. He founded Entrust Realty Advisors and is one of the few Black-owned institutional commercial real estate transaction advisory firms in the United States. He's completed over $5 billion of transactions and managed $1 billion of assets and portfolio properties. That's not the primary reason he's here, though. I would like to think of James as one of the bi-ecclesiastical and ecumenical leaders in our church, in the church at large, not just the Episcopal Church, but in what we call the church, where he manages to bridge things that sometimes people don't want to put the things together. He bridges property and mission. He bridges people and real estate, all of these things that are so important for the work that we do. He serves on the clergy staff at the Cathedral of Grace St. John AME Church in Aurora, Illinois, and serves on several boards that might be familiar to all of us, like Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary in Evanston, and many other places where he lends his expertise of both church and property and making those come together for the glory of God. James, it is a delight to welcome you to this convention, and I hope that you will continue to be a frequent friend among us. Please come forward.
Thank you, Bishop Jennifer. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be with you this weekend. I've had the distinct honor of leading one of the workshops yesterday, which were just wonderful. The enthusiasm, the spirit of unity and discovery that's here to really find and move further into what God has called each of us to do. So it's truly a blessing to you, Bishop Jennifer, to the diocesan leadership and convention planning committee, to the clergy, leadership, laypersons, and I know there's some young people here as well. It's a blessing to be here, and God bless you. God bless you this morning. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this outstanding convention. And I would like to anchor this keynote in what Bishop Jennifer has referred to as the gift of place. It's really a concept that for us is rooted in the principle, the biblical principle of stewardship. And I'd like in these few moments to share with you some perspective from my work throughout the United States and internationally in mission real estate development, and hopefully encourage you to, as you complete what I understand is the third year now of building capacity in your congregations to align property with mission. So I hope to encourage and to inspire you as you continue that work. I know this is not a sermon, but I do want to start off with a brief moment of prayer. So if you just bow your heads with me, let us pray. Oh, gracious and eternal God, we're thankful for this gathering of your people, for your work, for this opportunity to share and to hopefully be a blessing We ask now that you would let the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart to be acceptable in thy sight. O God, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. The church, in many cases, faces multiple pressures, and some of them I'm sure some of you are aware of. The pressure of shrinking congregations and financial resources, the pressure of aging facilities, suffering under deferred maintenance and underutilization, the pressure of higher operating costs for utilities and insurance. I heard a lot of talk about insurance this weekend, and maintenance, and the pressure of opportunistic developers enticing churches to make short-term decisions with long-term assets. Yet the church is in a really pivotal position of possibility and potential. The potential to be that place of gathering and community building, the potential to be that place of healing, the potential to be that agency and continue to be that agency through which divinity embraces humanity. In New York City, faith organizations own over 92 million square feet of land. That's 2.5 times the size of Central Park, if you had the chance to visit New York. And I expect the magnitude in the greater Indianapolis area is significant as well. Land values have increased in many areas, which create a valuable currency for reimagining property. Cities and states are embracing the potential of faith organizations to address social needs such as affordable housing. The pandemic has helped congregations to accept change in the way we do church without changing the message of the gospel. And many congregations have embarked on the difficult work of discerning and reimagining how to be church in such a time as this. So while there are many pressures, I believe the church has tremendous potential. In this context, the church has a gift to share with its community, the gift of place. I've been blessed to work in Navajo land, where I learned the indigenous people distinguish between space and place. For them, space is vacuous. It's like this room. It's emptiness to be filled. But place is different. Place has meaning. Place has presence. Place has history. It's where encounters happen, where identity is shaped, and where people return to remember. And even with the convenience of remote access, which I know we all love and take advantage of, place still plays an important role in our lives. Place is where we live. Place is where we worship. Place is where we work, where we celebrate, where we learn, where we go for restoration and healing. Place is where history happens, and you know it. Sometimes you just need to be there, right? Especially if it's a place where God's presence and love is manifested. So one might say that we are a people of place. And so the question is, what do we do? How can we use this gift of place to reflect the power and presence of God with us? And Bishop Jennifer, you expressed it so well in your email to me. And when you said, how can we use our space or place to glorify God, to serve our neighbors, and to participate in meaningful ways in our communities? I would suggest that the answer to this question starts with a mindset. And we've learned that there is a prerequisite mindset to discerning missional clarity and implementing a successful mission real estate development program. First is a mindset of outreach, recognizing that the work of the church is beyond the walls of the church. In fact, most of the stories about Jesus are what he did outside the synagogue and in the community. Second is a mindset of abundance over scarcity. Well, you know the scripture that God can do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we can ask or think. Third is a mindset of self-sustainability over dependency. The ability to plan strategically rather than operating in a crisis mode. And then finally, which is core to the work we do, is the mindset of mission through marketplace, that the church can accomplish its mission by engaging in the economic life of its community. Now, some might be averse to this idea, as you mentioned, Bishop, of this intermingling of the sacred and the profane. But I'm reminded of John 1:14 that lets us know that the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, which lets me know that our salvation is premised on divinity taking on humanity, with all of humanity's weaknesses and shortcomings, in order to bring about our salvation once and for all. So once you have the appropriate mindset, next is determining your missional calling, both as a congregation and individually in the community. Not what you were called to do some 50 years ago, but why are you in your community today? I believe God has a calling for each of us individually and corporately that draws on our unique experience, passions, skills, and gifts. And I just like to take a few minutes and share my own story of calling. I grew up in the church as a PK, a preacher's kid. But I have to admit, by the time I went to college, I was churched out. And some of you may know this feeling. So after business school, I started a career focused on real estate investment banking. I knew God had a calling on my life. I really knew that. But I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be a CEO. I'm sure many of you, especially the clergy in the room, will acknowledge that no matter what your ambitions and intentions may be, God knows how to get your attention. Can somebody just wave to that? So my career took off splendidly, but some 20 years in, through a corporate restructuring, an accident scare with my wife, and we all can remember the sobering reflections on 9/11, where I had worked in the Twin Towers some years before, put me at a crossroads. And so like many of us do, when we get to our wits' end, I prayed. And God said to me very, very clearly, be who you are. Stop trying to be somebody else, somebody famous, somebody important. Just be who you are. For me, that was the third generation preacher's kid who grew up and loved the church and the work of the church. So I enrolled in seminary, not knowing how I was going to support my family. And then 2 weeks later, a client called, which led to me starting my own real estate advisory firm while attending seminary. And colleagues in seminary and ministry would ask, how can I be so engaged in capitalism? And my colleagues in business would say, what's a minister doing in commercial real estate? And so I would respond that, don't you know that God is the ultimate developer? I mean, just read the book of Genesis where God said, let there be, and poof, right? things were created, those of you who went to seminary, what? Ex nihilo, out of nothing, to the book of Revelation, which references a new heaven and a new earth. So I continued on this bivocational path for 15 years with a passion for both real estate and for the work of the church. And then the opportunity with Trinity Church in New York City came along to lead a global initiative that focuses on mission real estate development, which again, as Bishop Jennifer mentioned, helps churches to discern and plan and implement projects that utilize their property to enhance both their impact in the community, but also to create sustainable financial capacity for the operation and ministry of the church. So something in me jumped when I read the job description and realized that this is what God had been preparing me for over the past 35 years. And now, over 5 years later, I can say without a doubt that this is my missional calling. And so my message in my story is, don't discount any experience, relationship, or skills you may be developing, both personally and as a congregation, because God has an ultimate purpose for each of us and our congregations that wonderfully brings all of that together. Now, in the book of Exodus, chapter 3, God calls Moses. Moses is calling to go back to Egypt and confront Pharaoh to release and free God's people. Moses focuses on his inadequacies, and he asks God, what if they don't believe me? And then God responds to Moses with a question. And I always say, watch out when God asks a question, because God already knows the answer, but the question is for our edification. So God asked Moses, what is that in your hand? And Moses looks down at his hand and he says, a staff. And that staff became the instrument of God's power and presence with Moses as he performed miracles and brought judgment on Egypt and liberated God's people. So our theological premise as we do this work is that God provides everything we need to do what we are called to do. And our challenge is to discover what is in our hand. The church has been blessed with professionals in the pews, with community relationships, goodwill, and trust. And in many cases, the church has been blessed with property and land. What is in your hand? I asked this question to the Anglican Diocese of Central Zimbabwe, whose community was struggling with unreliable electricity. The hydroelectric plant built by the government had failed due to droughts caused by climate change. Hospital incubators sat unused. Irrigation systems for farming were idled. School children could only study during daylight, and machinery and businesses could not function. So the diocesan team thought about it and discerned that they had two things: land and a lot of sun. So they came up with a plan to pilot a 156 kilowatt solar farm that sells reliable power back to the diocese and the community. School children would also be trained on solar energy, equipment installation, and maintenance. The pilot was so successful that the diocese is now embarking on a 5 megawatt solar plant venture that will sell power back to the government. What is your missional calling? And what is in your hand? Once you have the right mindset, and once you discern your missional calling, which is really your North Star for every decision you're going to make, then you're ready to focus on vision. And vision provides the picture of what it looks like when the church is fulfilling its mission in the community. What programs are in action? How is the congregation empowered? What partnerships are being engaged. Vision is what helps the congregation and the community to see the mission in action and their role in it. As I come to a close, I want to share some thoughts from a conference I recently attended on fishing differently. There's a Dr. Glenell Pruitt, who's the president of Jarvis Christian University, and it's based on the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, which is the story of Simon Peter's miraculous catch of fish after toiling all night and catching nothing. And you know, it led to Peter's calling and his acceptance to become a disciple of Jesus. She highlights three things that I have experienced as well in the work that we're doing. And the first is to learn how to repurpose. You see, the fishing boat was repurposed into a pulpit. It was still a boat, but when Jesus came aboard, it was used as a pulpit. So perhaps your facility can be shared or leased for mission-aligned uses without precluding its original purpose. Or you may be able to redevelop your property or adjacent property into affordable housing, quality education, preschool, health and wellness, environmental care, or respond to food insecurity, the immigration challenges, and create other forms of neighborhood economic development. Learn how to repurpose. And then second, learn how to respond and reimagine. Simon Peter was an experienced fisherman who toiled all night, and caught nothing. He must have been physically and mentally exhausted. But now Jesus, a carpenter, is going to tell an experienced fisherman a command that is totally at odds with his professional experience. See, sometimes we reject the messenger because of gender, ethnic background, what they do for a living, or because perhaps they did not come from the right school or maybe even the right denomination. But Simon Peter was willing to listen to instruction from someone who was not a fisherman in order to achieve a different result. So sometimes it takes a different background and perspective to discover what we call the art of the possible and new engagement opportunities with your community. Learn how to respond and reimagine. And then finally, learn how to reengage and collaborate. Even though they failed the first time, Peter and his partners were willing to try again. And they were willing to launch out into the deep. They were tired. It took more work to get out to the deep. There was more risk with a small fishing boat in deep waters, but they launched out with faith. You see, when you have missional clarity, when you have vision and direction from God, you can launch out with faith. Peter also understood community engagement. So when he saw the number of fish, he called out to the others. He said, "Come over here." Not just for himself, but for those in his community, because I've got more than enough. So in my conclusion, embrace your missional calling. Discover the potential of what God has already provided in your hand. Share the vision that God has given you. Embrace opportunities to collaborate with mission-aligned partners. Then launch out to the deep with faith so that God will be glorified. Thank you very much.